Welcome to the qdropped podcast. Today we have a special episode for you. We're going to be going over the last few or all the episodes that we've put up so far and kind of give you our thoughts on it and any updates that we have from the interviewees. So you might have noticed that last week we didn't have an episode, and that is because we had quite a bit of trouble with the file for the recording for that episode, and we just got super frustrated, and we also have day jobs, so we had limited time to deal with it. So we had to skip last week, and we decided that we're going to cap the season off there. So this is season one, the season one recap, and we're going to, before you feel sad about there not being any more episodes, we're going to launch season 2 in March. So it's not going to be that long that you're going to have to wait for the next episode. And it will be the episode that we promised and teased in the last episode, which is featuring two brothers whose QAnon father, actually ran for office in Colorado. But in this episode, we're going to go through each episode and kind of give you our thoughts on it and talk about the guests. And it's being recorded on video. So if you want to see what we look like while we're recapping these episodes, you can go and join us on the YouTube channel. The link is going to be in the show notes. And you can actually watch this episode as opposed to just listening. But if you want to just listen, just stay tuned. And also, you can join us on Patreon, and you'll get an ad-free version of this episode as well as all of our other episodes. And you're also going to get bonus content from our interviewees from all the previous episodes and upcoming episodes, including some of them actually feature video of the interviewee. So if you want to see what our interviewees look like, head on over to Patreon. The link is in our show notes. So I know you've heard his name a lot. This is John. He's my better half. And he's the one who's usually behind the scenes, making sure that everything sounds all right and looks all right when we're doing video. And you've probably heard his voice on Patreon. Because he does the intro to the bonus clips as well as the outros to the bonus clips. And this is what he looks like. This is John.
Hello. Yes.
You want to tell us some about you?
Well, I guess based on all that, I'm responsible for the last episode not being ready.
No, you're not.
Well, not really, but anyway, it's all part of it. No, I'm usually not on this side of the microphone and the camera, but not my forte, really. I'm just a regular guy, have a job, day job, 9 to 5. And I like to
rock out.
Yeah, I've kind of been, I've been kind of an audio nerd my whole life. Even when I was a kid, my dad worked in broadcasting. And so we always had kind of, a lot of different stereo equipment and audio stuff around the house. And I used to fiddle with all that, and then got into music and playing in bands when I was a teenager. And then that leads to, recording music and stuff like that. So I've always just kind of been working with audio and sound and as a hobby and on the side. And then more recently kind of got into podcast editing, and I work on a couple of podcasts. And then Courtney and I decided to start this one last summer after a lot of discussion about what we wanted to do with a podcast. This was kind of what we decided on, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, it's been hard in a lot of ways, like emotionally, but it's been rewarding. It's been an interesting project to say the least. And I mean, even the subject matter, even though I'm not directly affected with a QAnon relationship, I mean, Courtney's parents are part of my family as well. So, I mean, I'm involved in that, and I'm affected as well. So just not quite as firsthand as Courtney is, but so here we are. And that's me.
Yeah. Well, this is cool to have you on the microphone with me finally. But let's get into the episodes.
Sure.
So episode 1 was, of course, Bruce. Bruce is a father whose son he joined a militia and was stockpiling weapons. The relationship between Bruce and his son was complicated when Bruce asked him not to bring his guns to family gatherings anymore because there was quite a few grandchildren running around. And I really felt for him in that moment. What would you do, John, if somebody insisted on bringing their guns to our home?
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. But I mean, we're Canadian. I mean, gun culture here isn't like it is in the US. And I mean, through a lot of the interviews we've done, I don't know why I'm surprised to learn how much gun culture is a part of day-to-day life in a lot of people's lives in the US. It just isn't like that here in Canada. So, I mean, if somebody wanted to bring a gun into our house, or a family member, or just anybody wanted to bring in a gun into our house, I would be completely taken back by that. It's just not something that we do here, right? I mean, anybody that I've known or know that owns a gun, it's, for hunting, or, they live on a farm and, things that you have to do on a farm. But, the gun isn't front and center of their personality. It's locked away somewhere where you don't see it, or people certainly don't talk about it much, at least not in my experience. So, yeah, I mean, if someone wanted to bring a gun into the house, I would definitely have a problem with it. And I would definitely tell them that they're not welcome to have it in the house at all.
Yeah, I
Period.
would be the same. I wouldn't want a gun in my home. But we live in a small town where it's like most people have guns here, because it's like we live in a rural area, and it's not like the US where when people have guns, they have like guns for protection or whatever. These people have guns because they live out in the wilderness. And, I mean, we all kind of live in the wilderness here, and we all we get bears in our neighborhood. We get coyotes and cougars and stuff like that in our neighborhood. So it's pretty common for people to have guns here, but you never, ever, ever, ever see them or hear people talk about them. Never. I think the only time I've ever seen a gun outside of my dad's antique gun was on a cop.
Yeah. I had a friend when I was maybe in my early 20s, and he was a little out there conspiracy wise. And he used to talk about, it would just be like joking around conversation, but he used to talk about, when the end of the world comes, he's going to be prepared because he's got all these guns stashed away, and he's going to be ready for, the end times and all that crap. But I think it was more just joking, and I don't know if he actually had guns or not. I never saw them. He claimed he did, but either way, I never saw them. It wasn't something that we talked about all the time. It was just more goofing around conversation.
Yeah. When I was little, my dad had a gun, the antique gun that I mentioned before. It was like a family heirloom that got passed down. And I actually shot it when I was a toddler. It had blanks in it. That's what I'm told. I don't remember much about being a toddler. But I apparently, with my dad's help, shot a gun. But soon after that, my dad felt very uncomfortable having a gun in the house, and he gave it to my cousin, who's like a collector of that sort of thing. And ever since then, we've never had guns in the house. And then I had a cop for an uncle for a while there. He actually was fired for, that's a whole other podcast. But he used to bring over his gun, and he would play with it in front of me and my brother. And my dad got really upset about that and told him, don't leave your gun in your car from now on, or you're not coming into my house. And so he listened.
Even though he was a police officer.
Yeah, but the thing is he wasn't on duty, right? And he's just bringing it in, and he would play with it, he would show it off, and he I think you're probably picking up a little bit of why he might have been fired.
Well, I know more about the story, but like you said, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole other long podcast. But I don't know if I want to expose my family like that. But
Too late.
Yeah. No, he was otherwise. I have good memories of him as well. But he did that. My dad got mad at him, and he stopped. So he listened, and he stopped bringing around his gun. But that's kind of like life in Canada. Guns don't really come up. We're both in our 40s, and that's like the sum total of the guns in my life.
Yeah. I think I remember one of my uncles had a farm, and I remember I stayed overnight there a couple nights or something, and my cousin, I think it might have just been a BB gun. I don't remember. I was pretty young, but he had a little rifle. I don't know if it was a BB gun or a real gun, but we would like shoot at bales of hay and stuff. But it probably was just a BB gun.
Yeah.
I doubt it was any. I don't remember. I was probably like 6 at the time.
I don't think I've ever even touched a BB gun, but like we didn't even have gun toys when we were younger.
I went through a BB gun phase. I definitely did, and
I know
I'm not going to go into that story.
That's another podcast as well.
Maybe not a whole podcast, but definitely an episode of stupidity. But anyway, I had actually toy guns when I was a kid was kind of a big thing. We used to have toy guns a lot, and when I was a kid, actually a lot of the toy guns looked like real guns. Yeah, which is kind of scary. But nowadays they make them all like bright orange and stuff, which totally makes sense. Yeah, I'm glad they do that. But yeah, no, I was big into like toy guns, and the kids in the neighborhood, we would go around and do what you do with toy guns with each other. Yeah. So I kind of stand with Bruce on this, where you gotta, especially because he said that there was 13 grandkids running around, and if his son brought the gun in the house, you're putting their lives at risk, because at any moment an accident can happen. I like a lot of people like to assure everybody that they've got control over it and stuff like that, but it happens anyways. Accidents happen anyways. You have control until you don't.
Yeah. So we did connect with Bruce over Thanksgiving, the U.S. Thanksgiving. We have a different Thanksgiving up here in Canada. And he said that his son and him are getting along really, really well, and that things are going well. Obviously his son is still down the Q rabbit hole, but they have some kind of a relationship, and they did spend Thanksgiving, and my understanding is that they spent Christmas together as well. So good. Yeah, that's where Bruce stands.
Yeah, Bruce seemed like a pretty nice guy, nice man to be around.
Yeah, he actually writes a blog. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. You can check it out, because he's a good writer too. He's a fun writer.
I think he was he the first person we interviewed, or was he the second? I don't remember, but
yeah, I don't remember either.
He was very well spoken, and it wasn't the first time he'd been interviewed. Yeah, if I recall. So he kind of knew what he was doing. It made it easy for us as we were kind of getting started with this whole thing. He made it very easy for us to. He was actually interviewed
in a Vice documentary.
That's right.
That's how I found him. I contacted him after I saw him in a Vice documentary about QAnon. So I reached out to him, and he said yes. I'll put a link to that Vice documentary down below so you can see Bruce in that. But he also does his own videos, and there's lots of pictures of him on his website, so you could check that out as well. But episode 2 was Hale. I had such a soft spot for Hale.
Yes, so did I.
I just instantly felt like mommy energy. I just want to protect him. And Hale is a transgender man whose QAnon mother had posted some transphobic content on Facebook. And this is after there had already been like a rift forming between the two of them, because she was so deeply into the QAnon stuff. And so Hale kind of just had enough and he was feeling emotionally overwhelmed, and he decided that he was going to cut contact with his parents. And when we interviewed him, he was right on the verge. I think he was like a week away from moving out of the apartment that he was in to an apartment where his parents didn't know the location. And then he was going to send them an email and say, that's it. The only form of communication we have is email. Don't abuse it or that'll be cut off too, essentially. And he basically went like 99.9% no contact with his parents. And that is something that a lot of people are polarized when they listen to our podcast. Like, a lot of people will say, oh, you should never cut contact with your parents. They're your parents. And then you have other people who are like, this person should cut contact with their QAnon loved one because you shouldn't ever have to put up with that kind of toxicity or whatever. And I believe in the actual episode, I gave a disclaimer that you have to kind of trust that people know what's right for them. And, in talking to Hale, I could see that he was making the right decision for himself. But my parents are QAnoners. They're not quite as like hardcore QAnon as some of the people, some of our guests, QAnon loved ones have been. But if they were constantly pushing and constantly trying to get us to believe their theories and stuff like that, do you think there's a line that they could cross that would make us cut contact with them or make you want to, John?
I mean, I think that there's a line probably for everybody, but like you said, I mean, I think it's up to each individual to decide where that line is for them.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I have no doubt that Hale was doing the right thing for himself and what was best for him. And it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes because you don't necessarily know all the backstory and every detail about their lives. So you have, like you said, you have to really trust that people are doing what's right for them. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a line. I think when it comes to personal attacks, things like that, like homophobia and things like that, that would be a line. Yeah. I think, for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely lines for me. I think that if they were, because they spend a lot of time with our son, they have a really tight relationship. He loves them. They mean a lot to him. And if I found out that during that time that they spent with him, that they were trying to get him to believe their nonsense, that would probably be a line where I cut off their alone time at the very least.
Yeah.
I would definitely say no more contact if they're saying, like, if they're being racist and homophobic. As it stands right now, I don't like, they refuse to see the connection between their beliefs and the extreme right and all the homophobia and racism that's going on in the world. They refuse to see it. But if they were like outwardly saying things, especially because we have LGBTQ plus people in our family, that would be the line that they would cross, where I would say, okay, that's enough. I can't. And the thing is, that a lot of people who don't have a QAnon loved one don't really understand is how just overwhelmingly exhausting it can be emotionally to deal with that. It doesn't seem like much when you're just kind of explaining that they believe these crazy theories. It doesn't seem like much, but when you're faced with somebody who you knew for so long, who raised you, who means so much to you, and they turn out to be this horrible other person, and they're constantly trying to push these crazy ideas on you, it is so exhausting that sometimes cutting people off is self-preservation. And if you think that in that situation that somebody should should keep that person in their life just because they brought them into the world. You're essentially saying that your own individual mental health doesn't matter as much as keeping the people happy around you. And that's BS.
Yeah.
The only person who's ever going to look out for you is you. So
yeah,
you got to protect your...
Just because somebody's family, I don't think just gives them a free pass to treat you any way that they want.
Yeah, exactly.
And, not just related to the stuff that we've talked about in our podcast. There's plenty of other examples in life, right?
Yeah. And we also had the opportunity in that episode to talk about the dangers of colloidal silver.
Yes.
So we had, I guess, Hale's mother had given him colloidal silver to help him get over COVID. And we mentioned that colloidal silver can turn you blue if you take it repeatedly. Yeah. It can turn you blue. And we had that picture in the show notes of Papa Smurf, who is that famous man who took too much colloidal silver and turned blue.
Yep. That was a good one. That was a good one.
My mom likes to, and that's one of the reasons why she picks up our son every weekend and takes him for lunch, but they go to Subway. And that's kind of like by my request that he doesn't eat at their house, because I don't trust that she's not putting like colloidal silver drops in his drink or something.
Yeah.
So I know they're not doing that at Subway.
Yeah. I mean, one last thing about Hale before we move on is, like you said, definitely a soft spot. I mean, it was one of the first interviews we did. And even when I was editing that episode, I just remember like that was a tough one. Like, when you're editing these episodes, I'm listening to these clips like over and over and over again, like sometimes the same clip like 10 times in a row to just to get it to sound right. And that one was heartbreaking. I just wanted to invite Hale over and make soup. And I wanted to adopt him and just give him a safe place to
just be himself.
Be himself. And that one, I felt that one for sure.
Yeah. We were going around the house saying, "Just trust me, bro," for like a week. Remember?
Trust me, bro. Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah.
We were very inspired by Hale. And anyways, we do have an update from Hale. Hale, I spoke to him around Thanksgiving as well, and he had actually moved out and he cut off ties with his parents. He sent the email, they had a party, and he sounded happier than ever. So
great.
I think that he did the right thing, and I really, really hope that he is happy, and I want to see him thrive for sure.
Yes, very glad to hear that.
And then episode 3, we had Catherine. Catherine's mom had adopted some concerning eating habits and nutritional habits as a result of her QAnon beliefs. She's kind of in the whole wellness woo thing, and she had convinced herself that she needed to stop eating to protect herself from COVID. The idea of course was that if your body's not busy digesting food, it can use more of its resources to fight off illness. And the line that stuck out in that episode, of course, from Catherine was that her mom looked like a Tim Burton character. That was very descriptive. Like, you get a picture in your head. And it was, I don't know. That was an interesting episode because my mom, that's exactly kind of like my mom is super into the alternative medicine and the wellness and all of that stuff. And then there was also, of course, the Catherine's partner she stopped going over to Catherine's parents' house because the parents accused her. The partner, of course, was a biochemist, and the parents were accusing her of being brainwashed by the universities, and so the partner decided not to go over there anymore. Um, I kind of wondered like what we would do in that situation if like my parents, for instance, were accusing you of being brainwashed every time they saw you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm not the most confrontational person in the world, as you know.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily go out looking for confrontation. So, I mean, if I was in that position, I would probably not want to be around them.
Yeah.
I would probably definitely want to limit my time there. But again, it's not all about me. So, you know, there's kids involved, and I mean, you have a relationship as well. So, you know, I personally, I would probably grin and bear it the best I could. But I would definitely try and limit my exposure, let's say.
Yeah. Well, just so you know, if that did happen, I would cut it off.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
I wouldn't put you through that.
Yeah, and I would probably expect that you wouldn't, but you know, there's other factors like grandchildren and stuff like that. So it's
Yeah.
not just about me, right?
Yeah. We also like, it's also similar. The story was similar to mine in that like my mom has some very concerning habits with her health and well-being. Like for instance, her teeth situation, right? She doesn't believe in brushing your teeth, or not in the traditional sense of
Yeah.
brushing your teeth. She does. Honestly, I couldn't tell you what she does now, but I know that at one point in time she was rubbing spices on her teeth with her finger.
Yeah.
And she's gone from having a beautiful white smile to it just looks like everything's rotting in there, and it's really, really sad. And it's kind of like similar to what Catherine was saying about her mom not eating, that her mom looks like the Tim Burton character and stuff like that. I don't know how people can't tell that their habits are not helping them in any way, you know, because like I have bad habits myself. I eat way too much ramen, and I am a little round around the center, and I know when my habits are not good for me. Like I know when I've overeaten. I know when I probably need to put the chips away and pick up a piece of celery. You know, I know these things, and it's so weird that they're in just such denial of like the health issues that they're giving themselves. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
But I spoke to Catherine after Thanksgiving, and she told me that she had a huge happy welcome from her partner's family at Thanksgiving, and she spent it with them while her parents were boycotting Thanksgiving because the state had changed from red to blue. So they were boycotting Thanksgiving because that'll show them.
Boycotting Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the state really have anything to say about Thanksgiving one way or another? I don't know.
I don't know.
I didn't think so.
I mean,
so.
nothing that QAnoners believe makes any logical sense. So.
Right.
Then we had episode 4, which was crazy. Flo in Germany, his parents up and sold the family home and moved to Costa Rica without telling him. And like, I can't even imagine what that would be like. I know that like I wouldn't be surprised if my parents did that just because they travel a lot. Like I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to move to some other country because they've done that before. I have too. We lived in Mexico for 2 years. But that was a planned out thing, and we told each other, and everybody was prepared and stuff like that, you know. But if they just disappeared and didn't tell me, and they were like in some faraway country, I don't know how I would react to that. I would probably be pretty sad, you know? Like, that's pretty gutting. What would you do if your dad up and moved and didn't tell you to another country?
I mean, I'm not super close with my dad, but it would be so out of character for him that I might not be like gutted by the fact that he did it, but I would be concerned because it's so out of character to do something like that. And I would be concerned for his mental well-being, or I would think that maybe he's got himself financially invested in something that's gone bad or something. Like I would be more concerned than gutted, I guess. But in Flo's case, his relationship was a lot different with his family, and it's really hard to compare.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's so crazy. I just don't even know how I would react. But they also marched with far-right extremists. Some would call them Nazis or neo-Nazis in Germany when they were protesting various things that QAnoners protest. And they, when confronted with evidence of them marching alongside these characters, they denied it. They said there were no such people there. That I think is a line that my parents could cross to, where I'd be like, okay, you're hanging out with neo-Nazis. You won't even admit it. I don't feel safe having you come into my home. I don't think I would be able to maintain that kind of a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think that would definitely be a line. What's that expression? How many people there's two Nazis sitting down at a table and you join them. How many Nazis are at the table?
Yeah.
3 or something. Or I don't know exactly how that goes, but you get the idea.
Yeah. Or I think it's like if there's a dozen Nazis. No. We're doing Nazi math. No.
No.
If there were a dozen people sitting at the table and one Nazi, there's 13 Nazis at the table.
That's it. That's what I was trying to get out. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think the first time I heard that, I was kind of like, yeah, that's right. That's true.
Yeah.
Like,
if you tolerate it, you're no better than them.
That's right. You're just as bad. So, it's up to you to do something about it.
Yeah. So much for the tolerant left, as they say. We do have an update from Flo as well. In December, in early December of 2022, there was, I think it was 25 people in Germany were arrested. And they were QAnoners. They were arrested for plotting to overthrow the government. And so I reached out to Flo to see if that affected him at all. And he wrote back and he said no, but it really stunned him. And he said that otherwise he's doing really, really well. So yeah, Flo's doing good. That's good to hear. I don't know how his relationship is with his parents at the moment, but we are hoping in the future to have some people on so they can update us themselves. And also now is a good time to mention the fact that next week we're going to be doing a Q&A, and you can send in your questions for us and for the interviewees as well. And we'll see if we can get them to answer some of these questions in time for us to record it. But send your questions for the Q&A to qdropped@porthosmedia.net. The email address will be in the show notes, and we'll try to answer all of them if we can. Episode 5. This, along with, I think it was episode 14, is my favorite. Yes, this episode 5 and episode 14 are my two favorites. So episode 5 was so good because Josh was such a good speaker. He was so articulate and he was so expressive, and you could really feel like how frustrated he was through listening to him. And he was very frustrated. He, of course, had a father who used to be he had ties to the Michigan militia back in the 90s, and has recently gone down the QAnon rabbit hole. And Josh just started struggling to connect with him in any sort of meaningful way. It was pretty harrowing to listen to him, especially at the end when I asked him, I said, what's the worst that could happen? And that just opened the floodgates. He was like talking about, an increase in violence and, overthrowing governments, stuff like that. And just like, that's the worst that could happen. And that's something that I think about a lot, and I'm actually scared of, because I do think that, they've tried it once before. They, it's these plots have popped up in several different countries. It's a real concern. Do you think that increased violence is possible as a result of QAnon and QAnon beliefs, John?
Absolutely. We've seen it. Like you said, we've seen it. Even here in Canada, we had the trucker convoy a couple summers ago. It wasn't overly violent, but it was definitely a major nuisance for the people of Ottawa, and the government eventually had to get involved to remove them. But and there was, I guess there was a little bit of violence, I suppose, but that could be a lot worse. Like let's say that the trucker convoy were armed, or they had. I don't know if there was there. I'm sure somebody had a gun there. But let's say that they were a little more motivated to do more damage. I think that absolutely. We've seen it in the U.S. We've seen elements of it in Canada, for sure. We've seen it around the world. So violence is absolutely possible to get worse.
Yeah, and it's funny because in all of the interviews, I usually ask people, like, what worries you the most about QAnon and its effects on society as a whole. I ask everybody that question. And most of them kind of say that they're just worried about the loss of like a shared reality. Or they say that they're worried about misinformation and stuff like that. Josh, I found, was a little bit more in line with what I worry about. I obviously I worry about misinformation. I worry about the loss of a shared reality, but I think that's already happened. I genuinely worry that we are headed down a similar path that Germany was headed down in the 1930s, and it scares me, and it seems to be happening in multiple countries across the world. I hope that I'm catastrophizing. I really don't want it to turn out that way, but that's honestly what concerns me the most about all of this.
Just another observation. Almost every person we interview, without us bringing it up, has mentioned something about January 6th.
Yeah.
Like almost everybody has mentioned that in some way related to their situation, or it's come up. They've brought it up. And again, as a Canadian, it's not, it's not that it wasn't a big deal. Obviously it is, but it just seems like Americans really, really felt that to their core. Like that really, really impacted Americans personally. Mm-hmm. It's just odd. It's just an observation, I guess, that everybody mentioned it pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you look at people too on like social media and stuff like that, talking about it and the impact that it had, it definitely, it was like 9/11 for a lot of people all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I obviously for us again in Canada, 9/11 was huge. That was probably maybe that and COVID, probably the two biggest events of our lifetime. Mm-hmm. 9/11 probably in a lot of ways bigger, just because it was one event, where COVID's been kind of ongoing for years. But that day, nobody's going to forget that day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I I couldn't even wrap my mind around it when I first saw it happening. I was like my brain could not accept what was happening. It
Yeah.
was weird.
Yeah. And I
But
mean, you just amplify that by being American and how
yeah.
symbolic it was for
Yeah.
Americans, those buildings and the attacks and all that, like 100 times more, 100 times worse for them probably to process that.
Agreed. That's you can hear it in our guest voices and everybody
Yeah.
who talks about it for sure. So episode 6 was Brendan. Oh gosh, this was
Yeah,
another
that was
one
another hard one.
that we wanted to just adopt him and bring him home. But Brendan, of course, he was living in the same house as his QAnon mom, who also was blaming vaccines and blaming Brendan's choice to vaccinate his son for Brendan's autism and his son's autism. And essentially implying that he was broken and that his son was broken and they needed fixing, and that this was something that happened to them because somebody made a mistake. And it's just so heartbreaking to hear that, especially, I mean, I've known so many people who are on the spectrum, and it's just like there's nothing broken about them. They're perfectly functioning people. Their brain just functions in a different way. That's it. And
Yeah.
it's like having ADHD or, other things. It just makes you need to navigate the world in a different way. That's it. And I just felt really, really bad for him, having to live in that home with her. And when we were interviewing him, do you remember, like, she kept calling down to him and like asking if he wanted dinner, and he was like, it was funny because he was like ignoring her. It was funny, but it was
we were kind of getting some of their dynamic in real time. It was interesting.
Yeah. And he was like we were worried that they were going to hear. He wasn't wearing headphones. It's just
yeah.
But yeah, he really got into our hearts. And I think, I don't know, like, I was thinking afterwards, because our son's been diagnosed with ADHD, and like, what if my parents blamed us for that, some decision that we made, and said that that's why he has ADHD? Like, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, like again, is that a line there that they would cross? I mean, I guess it depends how far they push it, right? If it's just a comment they make one time, I mean, who hasn't dealt with some condescending comment from, a parent or an in-law or a family member at some point that you kind of just have to let roll off your back? But if it's something that's ongoing and they push it, I mean, I think that would definitely be a line that I would probably have to draw there.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I know Brendan's situation, it's not that he wanted to be living there. His situation, he was kind of stuck there. He had to live there for the time being, and he was trying to get out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely have empathy for him kind of being stuck there for the time being, but I would definitely be happy to hear that he got out of there at some point and got to go and live with his spouse and his child.
Yeah, I would be happy to hear that too. I did actually talk to him again. He said that he basically said happy Thanksgiving, and that's it. But he's still doing well, and his family is awesome, and I really, really hope that they're doing well. Episode 7, Dan was being convinced by his, no, he wasn't being convinced. He was being pressured by his QAnon mom to inject his own urine to counteract the effects of the COVID-19 vaccine. We need to I need to, it's my responsibility to mention the fact that you should not do this. You should never inject your own urine or anybody else's. It can give you sepsis and you can die. Don't do it. Your body is ejecting that as waste for a reason. You don't need it. So yeah, don't do that.
Certainly not for the reasons that they're telling him.
Yeah. So what would be your response if my mom tried to tell you to inject urine?
Oh boy. I mean, I would, first of all, I wouldn't be able to take it seriously. At first glance. I mean, I would just be like this is some kind of joke or whatever. Like I would have to just kind of laugh it off. But if it was clear that she was being serious, I mean, I would strongly urge you and your brother to get them some psychiatric help.
Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, it's dangerous. They're gonna kill themselves, or they're gonna have somebody else kill themselves, or make them seriously ill.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that if my mom started saying that, it would be nursing home time. And
yeah.
Sorry. I can't. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that they are going to hurt themselves. And my mom already has hurt herself with her alternative medicine.
Yeah.
And so it just is not a risk that I would want to take. It's, I don't know. But then the thought crosses my mind: are they already feeling like they need to do that? Have they already done it?
Yeah, who knows? Like, would they tell you? I mean, I doubt it. I doubt they would tell you, right?
No.
They wouldn't tell you. So,
and the thing is they agreed. Remember, they agreed to get vaccinated, even though they didn't trust the vaccines, and they were still convinced that the vaccines were going to kill people. I witnessed it. I went with them. I saw them get the vaccine. So it's always crossed my mind that they did that because they felt they had some kind of remedy to counteract the vaccine at home.
Oh, yeah, you bet they probably looked into that. And who knows what they found.
And what they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even want to think about that. I don't even know how I would find out.
Given the state of your relationship with them, they certainly wouldn't tell you about it.
Yeah. They definitely wouldn't. I mean, we talk. We still see each other, we talk, but we don't talk about that stuff because we know that if that can of worms gets opened, we have not good things happening.
Yeah.
Dan, of course, is an active moderator on the QAnon Casualties subreddit. So we have to thank him once again for doing that for people, because I know that place is a saving grace for a lot of people out there. And you can go probably find out what he's up to if you go visit that subreddit and follow along for a bit. Episode 8 was the people we couldn't interview. That one, we absolutely had to tell these stories. We reached out to the 2 people whose stories we told in this episode and asked for an interview, and we didn't get a response. But we felt that these stories were so important to tell that we told them anyway. But they were both publicly posted, fully public already, and we read them verbatim. So, we're not putting out any information out there that they don't want it. The first story, of course, featured a Black woman who was going through a divorce with her white husband after he started saying racist things to her. And I mean, obviously, John and I are both white, so we don't have any way of truly understanding what that's like. But we can begin to guess at least, and understand that that would be an absolutely horrific thing to experience at the hand of somebody that you thought was your best friend in life. Like, that is just absolutely heartbreaking. And I felt like this story was really important to tell because we had not told the story of a relationship breaking up yet, and we also hadn't had any any Black people on to interview. And that's because, I mean, there's a reason for that. Somebody actually asked me about that once. Why don't you have more diverse interviewees? And the answer to that is because QAnon is very white. Unfortunately, this is our heritage, I guess. Everybody else gets a cool culture, not us. But it's because everybody's white in QAnon. Pretty much everybody. I mean, I'd say like 95% of QAnon is white. And so finding people who, are not only a different ethnicity, but also willing to be interviewed about something that's so touchy is very, 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 very challenging. That said, we want you on. So if you're listening to this and you have a story, please get in touch, because we know that it does affect everybody. And every country almost, it seems to be. The second story, of course, was the just absolutely gutting. It was the teenage boy who was a survivor of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in Parkland, Florida. And he was super traumatized in the shooting, as anybody would be, and he's trying to overcome this, and he's dealing with survivor's guilt. And then his father starts accusing him of being a crisis actor, and that this event never took place or never was real. Yeah. What did you think of that story, John?
Yeah, that was, I read that story. So that was tough. I think I probably read it about 25 times, recorded it like 25 times to try and get one that was, that I could get through without just like making a mess of it. But no, that was a hard read. It was a hard topic. I don't know. I can't even relate. It's hard to put yourself, I mean, in either as the father or as the kid. I mean, I've never been involved in a school shooting, thankfully. And I've never been a father of somebody who has. So honestly, it's hard to really wrap your head around that story. Like as a father, how could you possibly think that of your child, especially when there was so much, I mean, and there was nothing to indicate that it was fake. Mm-hmm. Nothing. So, I mean, that the father is clearly not well mentally, and the son is paying for it.
Yeah.
In so many ways. He not only did he go through a shooting, a traumatic event like that, but then to deal with a father, no, like it's just I can't wrap my head around it. Honestly, I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I struggled with that one. I read that. I actually read that post on QAnon Casualties. It was before we started this podcast. I read it, and it kind of stuck with me. And I just can't believe that parents would do that. Like a father would do that, and the mother was living in the house too. Like, why wouldn't the mother put a stop to that? Your child has just been through the most traumatic thing they've ever experienced in their lives. You're supposed to be their safe space. You're supposed to be where they go to feel better, And like, it just, both of those parents in that situation failed this child miserably. And I would love to hear an update from this person, but I don't know that that's going to happen. I wish.
Probably not.
Yeah. I hope that both of the people in both of those stories from that episode are doing really, really well in spite of all of these things. So that's part 1 of our season 1 recap. To hear the rest of it, make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite podcast platform and or YouTube, and you'll be notified when that goes live. If you want to hear an ad-free version of this episode, hit up our Patreon and you'll find ad-free versions of all of our episodes, as well as bonus clips from our interviews with our guests, some of which are in video format. So you can actually like put a face to a name from some of your favorite episodes. That's all on Patreon, patreon.com/qdropped. The link is in our show notes, and we appreciate our patrons so much. We could not do this show without you. It is getting more and more expensive every week, so chipping in through Patreon is just amazing. Next week, we're going to post part 2, so stay tuned for that, and thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.